I'm Jim Richards. I want to welcome you to this week's CyberChurch. You know, we are talking about ancient mysteries. We're talking about things that happened that to this very day, scientists pretend that they don't understand how these things happen. They don't understand how pyramids were built. They don't understand how the heads on Easter Island, those stone heads, were moved around. They don't understand how these megalithic structures of old were built. They have found where brain surgery was performed in ancient Egypt and possibly in Babylon. We've got all of these scientific things that happen that are well documented, and they're well documented in the history of those particular countries. But mostly they are very accurately documented in the Bible. Now you need to understand something, and after this message we get more into who built the pyramids, how do they do it, and all these kinds of things. But right now we're just kind of laying the foundation for you to understand that these ancient mysteries are not as mysterious as we have made them to be, that there are simple, straightforward solutions, and that the number one reason we do not understand these ancient mysteries and why they're important to our life is just because, number one, we haven't read the Bible enough for ourselves, but also so many of these things that the Bible addresses, we discounted them as if they were just myths, little Sunday school myths, little Sunday school stories that you tell that have nothing to do with real life. But I want you to know, everything that's in the Bible is in the Bible for a purpose. Everything that's not in the Bible is not in the Bible for a specific purpose. The truth is, everything that we need to know to govern our lives is in the Bible. And, if we don't dig in there and dig it out and understand how these truths fit into our lives, then basically the valuable information that God gave us to make us more powerful, more effective, we're going to miss. Now, many of you have heard me talk repeatedly about what I call the first two pillars of faith. And the first two pillars of faith is, number one, how God created planet Earth. And so God modeled the operation of faith. And what he modeled was that first and foremost, according to the Hebrew language, he conceived in his heart what he wanted to bring to pass. Once he had conceived it completely and fully in his heart, then he spoke it into being by speaking with intention. And the intention was that what was in his heart would come to pass out here in this universe that he was creating. And that's exactly what happened. And then after almost every phase of creation, he would say, it is good. Now that word good means desirable, pleasing, that sort of thing. But in the Hebrew language, anytime you see the word good, you need to think harmonious. So he's saying that which came into being was harmonious with his intentions. It was harmonious with what he saw and developed in his own heart. And now understand, and this is something that the scientific world never ever wants you to accept, is that planet Earth is the only planet in all of the universe that has the capacity to sustain physical life. Planet Earth is a very unique place. Now, anti-God, atheists, Luciferians, fake scientists, they do not want you to believe there's anything unique about planet Earth, because if that is the case, then what makes it unique? Well, what makes it unique is that God created planet Earth. Now, the second pillar of faith, again, is there in the book of Genesis, where God creates man. And so God creates man in his own likeness and image. And so man functions exactly like God functions. As many of you have heard me say in the book of Mark, the 11th chapter, when Jesus talks about mountain moving faith, he actually follows the exact process that God used when he created all things that exist here in our universe. And so we're supposed to function like God. We're supposed to operate in faith like God. Now, one of the unique things about God is sovereign. Now, sovereign does not mean that he is in control of everything. That is actually a Luciferian occult lie that is used to bring slander against God. One of the earliest things that was taught by the Luciferians was that God, the Creator God, is in control of everything. Therefore, everything that happens in planet Earth is the will of God. Therefore, if there are wars, then those wars are the will of God. If somebody in your family dies prematurely, that was the will of God. Everything becomes the will of God because under the false concepts of sovereignty, that's the only thing that you're left to be. But the word sovereign doesn't mean that God is in control of everything. The word sovereign basically means that God acts independently of any force, any pressure, any source outside of him. So if we're created in the likeness of an image of God, we too are sovereign. In other words, nothing can make us do what we don't choose to do. Nothing has control over us. And so that's why God went on to say that he had given dominion of planet Earth to man. And the Bible repeats over and over again. Psalm 82, Psalm 8, Psalm 115:16 or 115:116. It talks about how that man has authority over planet Earth, and what is happening in planet Earth is the direct, fulfillment of the will of man, not the will of God. Now, this is so incredibly important because if you don't understand these basic pillars of faith, I'm not talking about just miracle working faith. I'm talking about faith to trust God as you walk through the world, as tragedies unfold in your life. You want to understand what's happening, why they're happening. You want to know what you can do to stop horrible things happening in your life and happening in the world around you. So since God gave authority to planet Earth to man, then God cannot do anything in planet Earth if he does not do it through a man that will yield to him, you'll trust him, believe him, follow him. And so Jesus came to planet Earth, and you can read this over and over again, where Jesus taught very plainly that the only reason he had authority on planet Earth is because he was born a man. He was a man without sin, and without sin is the only real difference between Jesus and all the other human beings on planet Earth at that time. Now, when we get born again, we no longer have a sin nature. Therefore, we get the opportunity to function exactly like Jesus did. Now, Jesus did something really unique and really interesting, and I think we miss it. In Matthew 28, before Jesus departs, he says, all authority is given me in heaven and earth. Go ye therefore, and make disciples, baptize in my name, preach the gospel of the kingdom to the ends of the earth. All these things that he said not only there in Matthew 28, but in other places. But it's really interesting that when Jesus said all authority is given to him, the reason all authority is given to him is because when he came to planet Earth as a man, then he was able to have authority in planet Earth. Whenever he was raised from the dead and received the kingdom, then he had all authority in heaven. And once anything is established in heaven by the finished work of the Lord Jesus Christ, then that is set. And now, as human beings, through binding and loosing, we declare as legal in our lives that which Jesus did in heaven. We declare as illegal in our lives that which he delivered us from through his death. So stop and think about this. We have been told that God is sovereign, so He just does everything He wants to do. He doesn't have to explain anything to anybody. If He decides He wants your child to die prematurely, then He does it, and always has some mystical reason. Some goofy something like, okay, God needed He needed another voice in His choir. He needed another angel. Well, first of all, human beings don't become angels. We are not angels. We are human beings, and so. It's phenomenal that we don't see that, and therefore we end up blaming God for everything that happens. And I'm telling you, the false message of sovereignty drives more people away from God than probably any other message, because God gets blamed for everything. Now, you need to realize this. On the other side of that coin, we have been taught that Satan has free reign and that he has authority on planet Earth, and that he can just run around terrorizing people and doing what he wants to be. That's not true either. And if all authority is vested in Jesus, and then if He sends us out to function in authority, then one thing for sure, we know that Satan has no authority over us. At the resurrection of the book of Colossians, it tells us that Jesus stripped on the cross. He stripped Him of all principality and power. He has no right. He has no rank. He can't do things in planet Earth just because He wills for them to be done. It's just like God the Father. If He's going to make something happen in planet Earth, it has to happen through willing people who choose to believe Luciferian lies, and who choose to operate in selfishness and all of these destructive sinful tendencies. But you need to realize that Lucifer had to have a plan to attack planet Earth, and it had to be a plan that he could legally operate. So many people have asked me, and I've mentioned this before, well, why did God send Satan to planet Earth, to torment man? Well, God didn't. You see, man had authority in planet Earth, and the real truth is, all the way back to the garden and afterwards, man could have, Adam could have, at the very first temptation, Adam and Eve could have sent Satan away because he had no right to be here. Man gave him the right to be here and engaged him and really made it possible for him to do what he did. Now, after the garden, then you have Adam and Eve, and Adam and Eve, they have the choice now to choose to follow everything that God had taught them, or to follow whatever opinions they had based on their new sinful nature. And stop and think. The whole struggle of the fall of man was, can we be our own God, and can we decide good and evil for ourselves? And so in every situation, man decides, will I trust God, or will I trust whatever else I'm getting from fake science and from all of these other places, which basically all go back to Luciferian thought, Luciferian doctrine. But in order for Satan to have a phenomenal impact on planet Earth, he needed powerful representatives here who had the authority to do his bidding and to make these things come to pass. Now, Jesus became a man by the Holy Spirit coming upon Mary, and so Jesus spiritually he was God, but as far as his physical body came from Mary, and he was 100% a human being. As a matter of fact, the Bible tells you in the book of 1 John, the 4th chapter, that the spirit of the Antichrist always denies that Jesus really became a real man, because one of the things I can tell you this that Satan does not want you to know is that you have authority over him, not because you pray 24 hours a day, not because you do everything right and don't have any flaws, but you have authority because you are a human being and God gave all authority on planet Earth to human beings. So Satan then has to find a way to be able to exercise authority on planet Earth through human beings. Now, whenever the sons of God, which the only two times in the Old Testament that term is used, it is speaking of angelic beings. But then secondly, let me just mention this. Sometimes I don't think we should use the word angel or angelic being as often as we should, because we have a one-dimensional concept of what an angel is, what an angel looks like, and that really makes some of the things that the Bible says seem impossible. But they only seem impossible because of the way we interpret the concept of angels. Now, there are all kinds of different angels. There are angels with different ranks. There are angels with different functions. There are angels called watchers that they have a way to come into planet Earth and function. They look like men. Everybody thought they were men. I mean, you can go all through the Bible with the patriarchs. You can go to Lot. When the two angels came to Lot, and everybody thought they were men, and they were referred to as men. Well, according to Enoch, these watchers at some point in time, they were drawn into a temptation, and I'm not going to go into that whole thing there. They were drawn into a temptation to cross over and to become sexually involved with human beings. Now, becoming sexually involved with human beings, this was very probably a precursor, if you will, because remember, the angelic beings, they crossed over from the other side. And therefore, they saw creation. They saw how physics works. They saw how geometry worked, because everything that God did in this physical world was based on these laws of physics, laws of geometry, mathematical equations, and all this kind of stuff. They saw how all of this stuff was done. But very probably, they may have understood from being in heaven that when the Messiah comes, he would be the offspring of the Holy Spirit and a human. And one of the things that we see from the time that it was prophesied in the garden, and that God spoke it out, and very probably, I would imagine, very probably Adam spoke it out. But whether he did or not is neither here nor there. But anyhow, from the time of the garden, then every time God would reveal something about how he was going to save the world, then that would turn into a situation where the hand of the or God's plan would get revealed a little bit. And so now Lucifer would put together his strategies about where to strike. So in the garden, it was revealed that the Messiah was going to be born of the seed of a woman. So the first strategies that Lucifer came up with to destroy the possibility of a Messiah coming was this thing about these watchers crossing over and corrupting the seed of the human race by becoming involved with women. But more than that, Lucifer knew that only mankind had authority on planet Earth. And so if he was going to do anything on planet Earth that required decision making and authority that was going to function in this realm, he couldn't do it. He had to have human beings, or at least part human beings, to do this. So the strategy of the watchers crossing over and mixing seed, which God warned against, mixing seed with the daughters of men, this would become his way to create a corrupted human race, if you will, not fully human, not fully spiritual. And so he did this, and then these giants. By the way, let me say this: when we read about the giants in the Bible, there's a couple of problems. Number one, there are numerous words in the Bible that refer to the giants or refer to what we call Nephilim. Now, I use the word Nephilim because the only characteristics of one of these half-breed beings was not just the fact that they would be large, gigantic. Based on everything that we know, not only from the Bible, but from the writings of these other nations that had to deal with Nephilim. And even here in America, the North American Indians had to fight with giants. And it's recorded, and actually not only is it recorded, but the graves have been found of giants that have been slain here in America. Now, that's not something that science is ever going to admit. That's not something they're going to admit is true. They're going to cover it up because why? They don't want to validate anything that's in the Bible. But these Nephilim, which, like I say, there were other words that referred to them. Rephaim was another word that described them. They had numerous words in the Bible that were used to describe them, but also the inhabitants of the land had other words that described them. So it wasn't just the fact that they were tall, it was the fact that they were, some of them were somewhat almost superhuman. Some of them had 2 rows of teeth. Some of them had 6 toes and 6 fingers. There were all kinds of characteristics, but the biggest things were these people. They propagated evil. They propagated godliness. They taught people things that were not true about God. Now, the concepts that the Nephilim taught about God, you got to realize, so here's these supernatural beings, and they're claiming that they are gods. If you watch Ancient Aliens on, I believe it's on the History Channel, I watch that sometimes and I laugh, but it still amazes me that people will believe that aliens, that ancient aliens came and created the human race and did all this stuff, when we actually have a historical account in the Bible, and then the nations that existed in the Middle East, they have pretty much the same history, and so we have a better account of biblical history, a better recorded account than we do of almost any historical period in the whole world, and is validated by people that are not believers in God, people that worship other gods. So it amazes me that science what's called science, they continually try to find ways to reject this. By the way, let me say, man, you will love the series on ancient mysteries because I get to go into much deeper detail and explain a lot more things to you and help you understand how this applies to your daily life. So be sure and check it out. Now listen, let me, while I have a little bit of time here, just let me get this in here. Now the Watchers, when they would come to do God's will here on planet Earth, they probably had a particular portal or a particular place that they came through from the other realm into this physical realm. Now, we don't know this, but we do. We don't know if the Watchers that fell or rebelled, we don't know if they used the same portal, the same entryway into the physical realm, but there's a high probability that they did. A high probability that God created the universe to have portals to the other side, so that there would be a place for angelic beings to come into planet Earth. There would be a place for Watchers to come into planet Earth. Now, we know based on history that the Watchers actually crossed over at Mount Hermon. And so there was a portal of some kind in Mount Hermon. And Mount Hermon is really interesting because Mount Hermon is kind of credited for the center of Baal worship. And all through the Middle East, altars that were built to Baal faced Mount Hermon. And in fact, I don't know if it's true, I don't know if it's accurate, but the ancient world believed that this portal that came from heaven to earth also continued, and there was a portal that went from earth into Sheol, which is the abode of the dead. It's not the eternal hell, but it is the abode of the dead. And remember, the first angels that rebelled, they were bound in chains in Sheol. And so very possibly where Mount Hermon is, and there at the base of Mount Hermon, that this portal goes all the way from the invisible realm to planet Earth to some aspect of the afterlife. So these Nephilim come to planet Earth because they're part man. Now they start ruling over the human race. They're so fierce. And by the way, there are indications that some of the women participated freely with these watchers, these fallen angels, but in many cases there was rape. And so the Nephilim came and they began to propagate, or the fallen angels came, they had sex with these women, their offspring was the Nephilim, and so they began to propagate really religious ideas that eventually were spread into all of the idolatrous communities. All of the Greek gods, all of the occult gods of the Eastern world, all of them were gods of wrath, gods that you had to fear, gods that you had to constantly appease, and so they presented themselves as God, and but the problem is this became the belief that the children of Israel later on adopted about the one true God, and that is that he's a wrathful God, that he is angry, that you have to appease him. And so they were afraid of him. They really didn't want close communion with God. Well, how many people today are afraid of God? How many people today believe that God is wrathful, that God is angry all the time, that God is always trying to find a way to get you, that you got to make sacrifices, you got to do things you don't want to do to appease the wrath of an angry God? Well, every bit of that is Luciferian doctrine designed to turn us against God. Now, the Nephilim, as we are going to discover coming up soon. By the way, the reason I called this message Stairway to Heaven is because I wanted you to understand that there is a portal from the other world to here. Now, I want you to understand this. I only have a few seconds to say this. The pyramids and the ziggurats that you have all over the world are actually primarily portals into another realm, and that's why they exist. That's why they were built, is because they were looking for ways to probably transport themselves all over planet Earth, to transport themselves between here and the other realm. And of course, that's why later on these pharaohs wanted to be buried in these things, because they saw them as portals, and this would be their way to launch into eternity. So these stairways to heaven became a source of corruption for everything that we believe about God today. Listen, be sure and check back with me next week, and you're going to love where we're going and how it's going to help you.